Welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable. I'm Sarah Vantine here with Ted Ings. Today we have Joel Furno, founder and CEO of Citrin Automotive Hospitality. And Ted, we have quite the conversation in store.
Sarah, we really do. Joel Furno, founder and CEO, Citrin Automotive Hospitality. Welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable, Joel.
Ted, Sarah, always great to be with you all. Thanks for having me back.
It's amazing, Joel, how the industry is evolving, all the things that are happening, the focus on fixed ops right now. We were talking with Sarah in the green room, and it's amazing that fixed ops doesn't always get the love it deserves, especially those fixed ops directors who are working so hard to elevate the process for the customer. What are you seeing out there as well?
Yeah, obviously in this climate with margin compression on the front end, fixed ops is getting more and more of the spotlight, which I think is overdue. And the good operators are all over it. It really completes the entire life cycle of the customers after they purchase a vehicle. And obviously the goal being 100% absorption in the service department is something everyone's striving for and takes a lot of pressure off the front end and helps dealers get through any economic challenge. If we look back even through the 08, 09 recession, the ones who did well during that time period really leaned on fixed operations.
And Joel, your company actually helps provide people, okay, which our industry is all about. Tell us a little bit about that. Just bring our audience up to speed on what Citrin actually does in the automotive hospitality arena.
Yeah, so I started a valet parking company in college doing restaurant and hotel valet. And about 5 years in, back in 2011, a dealer principal called me and said that he had a great experience with our staff at the restaurants that he'd like to go to and wanted to replicate that at his Mercedes dealership. And so it was our introduction to the automotive industry. And we learned all about fixed operations and CSI and the pressure that the service advisors and the service managers and technicians are facing. And so we came in and really installed a valet service level of hospitality on the service drive, making sure that the hourly team members who are typically known in the dealership world as porters or greeters, we call them service drive valets. And we ensure that that first impression when somebody pulls into a dealership is strong. There's a door service element. We work with our partners on how we hand off the customer to the advisors. And then making sure the lots are organized and little things like lot organization, key handling, and the overall process flow of that experience from the start, from when the vehicle arrives at the dealership to when it departs. We make sure that part of the process is really dialed in. We knew we could have a big impact on the customer experience with uniforms and professionalism and hospitality training and lot organization and SOPs. But the light bulb moment was seeing how big of an impact we had on the service advisors and the service manager. I think those two roles are under a lot of pressure right now. And to have the stability where they can come to work every day at 7 a.m. and have a strong team who's well organized, well trained, with an operating plan on how the entire part of that business is going to flow allows them to focus on production and customer experience. So advisors have a better experience. They're able to spend more time with the customers. We're helping protect against lost surveys due to cars taking too long to get to the shop or come back up. We're helping technicians be more productive by making sure they're not looking for cars or sitting in the car wash line, and really just come in to solve that part of the business so the dealer can focus on what they're great at. If you look at the hospitality industry, if you go to a restaurant or hotel, 99% chance it's an outside third-party valet company. So those industries that are very sophisticated and longstanding have decided, 50 years ago that they didn't want to be a part of that part of the business. Not that they can't manage their own valets, but they don't want their general managers and their team having to worry about running a restaurant and not sure who's going to show up to be the valet that night. And so we're bringing that solution nationally to car dealers over the last 15 years, and it's been really fulfilling.
Joel, it's so incredible to see all that you've impacted with Citrin. And one of the biggest pieces that I'm excited to unpack, and Ted and I are excited to unpack with you today, are some of the best practices that you've really helped these dealerships deliver on. Specifically, I know we're going to talk a little bit about, technician shortage and some of the retention strategies and how this hospitality mindset really helps with not only that, but then the CSI, CSE programs, pickup and delivery, and the service lane being really the revenue driver in dealerships today for how these operations are staying, afloat and profitable. So Joel, just to kind of take things, back to the fixed ops conversation, what are you seeing, with some of the dealerships in our audience today? we have a lot of incredible performers that don't have a technicians shortage, but industry wide, Ted and I are hearing there's some challenges with continuing to find good technicians and retain technicians in their organization. How much of that strain is actually being felt in some of the elements that you are seeing with communication breakdowns and disjointed check-in processes and some of that friction that can happen in those experiences where dealerships are trying to not add as much staff or minimize some of those expenses?
Great question. Our process, which plays into your question, starts with really breaking down every step of the process from the moment a vehicle arrives for service. And it would, coming from your background in the BDC, it starts before that. What happens when somebody lands on the website? How do they schedule their appointment? What's the process when they call in? How easy is it to make an appointment? But there's so many lost minutes that add up to really reducing the productivity of the service advisors and the technicians. So our process starts, which I'd recommend every service director doing, is just taking time, even for 15 minutes a day, take 15 minutes out and start to document the process flow. What is the first thing that should happen when somebody pulls in? Who's the person who greets that customer? Who's accountable for that? Do you want your service advisors to walk out and receive the customer after they're arriving, or do you want the valet to walk the customer into the person's desk? Do you want your greeters and valets to do the damage inspection to make sure it's done consistently and to take that load off the service advisor, or do you want the service advisor to come out and make that part of their initial conversation with the guest? And so all those little micro opportunities are ones that if there's not a process documented in a standard operating procedure manual for each role in the dealership, then there's going to be processes that break down, and it's going to lead to an extra 5 or 10 minutes per technician at $220 effective labor rate is $20 per RO if they're looking for a car in a parking lot. I don't know how many dealers we have that have their technicians running the car through the car wash. It doesn't sound like a big deal on paper, but if they're in line, or even if they're not, it's 5 or 10 or 15 minutes away from their bay. We see some operators investing in parts runners to bring parts to the lift to make sure that the technician doesn't have to go wait in the window to get the parts that they need for their vehicle. And that can be done through technology, and it can also be done very simply through really documenting the processes across the dealership and spending some time understanding where some of these bottlenecks are, to where we've seen with stronger support staff and better processes, you can schedule more appointments per service advisor, and your technicians can actually work on more cars and have a better quality experience if they're not dealing with service cars sitting on the drive for an extra 20 or 30 minutes because nobody had gotten to the ride up, or if it's parked in the wrong spot and nobody labeled it, or if they're hunting keys down. It's really hard to spend time and stop to focus on these small items as a service director because of how much is on your plate. But I would just encourage everyone to spend a little time every day and every week, every month working on the business. And I know how chaotic it can be having 50 to 100 customers coming in and dealing with the span of control with advisors and all the staff that has to go into that. But I would just encourage everyone to take time to really start to document their processes and look for ways that they can pick up 5 or 10 minutes per customer, both for the service advisor to spend more time with the customer as well as the technician to be able to get to that car faster without all the different things that go into their job that are non-productive part of turning wrenches and driving productivity.
Joel, that's a great call to action because a dealer may have documented that a while back, but to revisit that and take a look at it again today, here in the second quarter of 2026, and see if there's been anything that changes, okay, in the relevancy, because you're so right. All of this begins there, and how important all these elements really factor into into the pressures that a dealership is under today. That fixed ops service parts, that department is really now the engine. It has been, but even more so. It's more visible, Joel, that with all the pressures on the dealership, fixed ops is getting the focus right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And it's also the life cycle, right? I don't know the stats offhand, but you guys may, about the customer retention, how likely a customer is to buy another car from that dealer if they show up for their first service appointment and it's hard for them to schedule the appointment, or if they pull in and nobody speaks to them, they're not greeted quickly, if their car takes 3 or 4 hours to get through the service appointment, even for an oil change, which we've heard, that's going to hurt desire to work with that dealership again. And I think there's also a lot of a diminishment in brand loyalty right now. Customers are switching brands quite a bit. And perhaps part of that is because they're not just getting a great experience when they go to get their car serviced.
And you know what? It's the experience that separates the good from the great, right? It's because you can get your oil changed likely anywhere, but it's that experience, and that's really where you come in as well. Joel, also want to ask you, what about the dealers that are being asked by their OEMs to handle more volume with the same team, or even doing it with less people? What are you seeing out there, and what are some of your thoughts there?
Well, obviously, when revenue goes down or gross per sale, and there's margin compression on the front end. And I think January was really hard for a lot of people. I think the storm really hurt a lot of people. I know nobody wants to use weather as an excuse, but to have 2 or 3 weeks to where it was basically in a snow emergency, and then you have just some weird things going on with the economy and on the news, you compound all those things. And January's, especially in these colder cities, are generally slower. So when you compound all those things, it can be very scary to have a really, get out of the gates for 2026 and be behind the 8 ball. And so what we're seeing is people came out of the gates behind budget, and we're looking to make up that through cost cutting, which is a natural reaction. And I think being very focused on cost, especially cost that's being wasted. But what we see, unfortunately, is a lot of things like support staff, whether it's self-managed or through a third-party vendor. Those were areas of the P&L that were being cut. And yeah, you can say, well, my advisors can handle the customer greeting, and that should be their job, or it should be my service manager's job to do this. I just think groups need to be really careful understanding when they're cutting into muscle that might show up well on a P&L for a couple of months, but might be deteriorating profits on both gross per RO and the number of units you can move through a shop, and what is the weight it puts on the stress of both the service advisor, service manager, and technician that distracts them away from their core job function. So I think it just takes a really strong partnership between the GM and the service director, and the corporate office and the GM and the service director, to make sure that there's a true partnership there. And I've worked with service directors for 15 or 16 years. I haven't met very many, if any, over that time that are just frivolous spenders. I don't think it's part of the common personality index of a service director. They're much more conservative. But if they're asking for a resource, they may not have all the reasons to defend it, but there's got to be a level of trust that they're also generally working on a net income basis of their department. And sometimes I don't see that they have enough latitude to make the decisions and make the right investments that will very quickly show an ROI, or very quickly diminish their ability to grow their department because of cost-cutting exercises.
Joel, I'm so glad you touched on that, because the reality in automotive dealerships is that we operate with the percentage of ambiguity in a lot of the decisions that we make to run our business. And there is a lot of tendencies for us as retailers or just in general to get overwhelmed with data and look at, okay, well, how does that prove, like you said, on the P&L, how do I prove or defend that I need to keep or add this program? But the reality is, a lot of decisions, you're not going to have all of the information immediately available, and you do have to rely on your service director's intuition. And also, again, some of the ambiguity in these decisions are really critical to picking up more business, but it takes that first step. And one of the things, Ted, that comes to mind is service pickup and delivery programs and the bandwidth in growing some of those programs. So, at the Roundtable, Ted, we've had many dealerships that started with these service pickup and delivery programs without any proven data in the case or any proven best practices. But today, service thousands of repair orders in that fashion. And so, Joel, how do you see retailers scaling these types of programs with service pickup and delivery without adding more complexity to like you said, an overworked service manager or service director that is creating more problems for them in trying to scale it? And then also, how do you prevent overwhelming the service advisors and the rest of the team?
Great question. I think it starts with the mindset around pickup drop off and the expense to go pick up cars for the customer. what I hear a lot is that we want to make sure we're not picking up oil changes, and we want to make sure that the cost to do so, we're getting back on increased gross per RO. And a lot of GMs want to see that. Is my gross per RO tangibly higher enough to cover the expense on that? Even in scenarios like with Ford where they're getting reimbursed.
Mhm.
So I think I think you have to look at a lot of this as a marketing expense. I mean, how many marketing dollars are thrown at other areas? Don't just look at it as the gross per RO lift has to pay for it, because if we think about the service enhancement and having a concierge level service, what that does for retention and all the things we just talked about. So I think more so than just the apples to apples cost to revenue lift, what is the long-term impact of the dealership and the positioning the dealership wants to have in the marketplace? So I think it starts there. And then to your point, it's a very tall ask to ask a service manager, service director, who is already trying to manage the team and get technicians in there and coach advisors and deal with the customers coming through. Not to mention this hourly staff that we talked about on the service drive. It's hard for them to field enough people to make sure customers are greeted and cars get back to the shop quick enough, let alone adding on a complexity of pickup drop off. So somebody needs to manage that, whether that's probably not the service manager who's in charge on salary or in an elevated role to really run that program. There's some wonderful technology platforms out there to help on the logistics and the coordination. And I see some of that software not being used properly. Most of them have capacity planning, just like you would your shop. But we see often that the BDC has wide open availability to schedule 5 appointments at the same time. So now you send all of your hourly staff out, and now your service advisors or your service managers are having to greet customers and pick up cars because you sent your staff out. So really leveraging and leaning on the technology providers to make sure the capacity planning is set. And even where you start with 2 people all day, you can now do 2 trips and 2 capacity slots per hour based on the number of people you want to start with, and then grow the program from there. But it does add complexity. And I think the fear that I hear a lot from dealers, especially the service managers and director, is I know I have a lot of turnover with my hourly staff. So if I commit to offering pickup drop off, and I might be able to go out and hire 4 or 5 porters in the next couple of weeks, how long are those porters going to work for me before they turn over? And what happens if I lose 2 or 3 in the same week? What happens if I have a couple people on vacation? It's one thing to deal with that on the service department, right? It doesn't create a great experience for anybody, but you can get by. Now, when you're committed to doing these trips and you don't have a stable labor force, we see that being impacted quite a bit. The other thing that's been interesting is the resistance for service advisors and even the BDC to offer it consistently.
Yes.
So we hear back, well, the principal's all on board, the GM wants to do it, the service director wants to do it, but we can't get, nobody wants it. Nobody wants the service. So we said, okay, let's test that. Why don't you guys just schedule the appointments as normal, and we'll have our leader on site call the already existing appointments back and offer them a free pickup and drop off. And so we did that. And we saw that 25 to 30% of customers we called said yes to a free pickup drop off for the same time that they were scheduled to come to the shop. But now we have a 2-hour window to pick it up, which adds more flexibility for the shop and to get the customer back. The final piece I see as a struggle, Sarah, is the loaner cars. Dealers are trying to operate this without loaner cars. So now you have to send 2 people out or use Lyft and Uber, which is extremely expensive. And also you have a time clock to get the car back to the customer before they're carless for that night.
Yes.
Right. So the only way, in my opinion, to do it successfully on scale in a cost-effective way is it's much cheaper to use a loaner car and gives you a ton more flexibility than trying to save a few bucks on loaner cars and shuttling your valets around with 2 people in 1 car to go pick up vehicles. So that becomes a challenge as well. So you have to have buy-in top to bottom, and then you actually have to have each layer has a role to play to make sure these are carried out. And it's a tall ask. That's something we've grown more and more into doing for our partners is to help them with that, because it's really a symptom of not having a great leadership and foundation with the other hourly staff at the dealership. So if you don't have a stable team of valets and porters, then it's really hard to then add on more to that existing team. It's almost like there's a department inside the service department, and that's the hospitality / mobility / loaner car / shuttle / car wash team, right? Who's actually managing that team? And it's usually nobody. And that's what makes adding more complexity difficult.
Joel, I think the unspoken part of that is that team you just referred to also needs training, they need mentoring, they need support, and that's also where you come in. You do some very novel things, if you don't mind speaking to that, because you really help grow these people, okay, who are the valet team that Citron provides, and more. Tell us a little bit about that because I think a lot of dealerships don't realize all you do behind the scenes to help grow that team.
Well, I'll start off with the desire to create dignity in these jobs. I mean, this is typically the first and last impression people have of the dealership is the valet or the service greeter, and yet it's a high turnover position. There's a lot of frustration with that workforce demographic, but the reality is it's the future workforce of the entire industry. I've met so many people who are service directors, fixed ops directors, GMs, and principals that when I ever ask them, what was your first job in the business? I ask every single person that. And it was a parts runner. It was a car washer.
Yeah.
It was a lot tech. It was a valet. And so we've really embraced that. And we've really evolved over the years into being a workforce development arm for the dealer. So we're really good at recruiting. We offer flexible scheduling from 10 hours to 40 hours around school schedules, around other jobs, around passion pursuits that our team is focusing on. And so we're actually, by being flexible with our schedule and having a wide net with our recruiting arm, we're able to bring people to the car dealerships that wouldn't have otherwise fit into a traditional, hey, I need somebody to work 40 hours and these specific hours, and that's that. And so over the last 2 years, we're really proud to say that we've placed over 250 of our valets that started with us in a dealership are now service advisors, technicians, or in the sales team. We have a very prominent dealership in Columbus, Ohio that does around 250 ROs a day. 5 of their 12 advisors are Citrin employees that
Wow.
worked for us before moving into there. So we don't charge for that. We celebrate it. We don't want to put any red tape in between our people earning opportunities to grow their career. And we've really focused on that being an enhancement of our business, is not just solving the problems and providing service, but also now providing a farm team of folks who are getting all the basics and things that they need from a teamwork perspective, from being on time to work every day, to learning the business front and back, to spending time out there. And that transition from somebody who spent 3 to 6 months working as a valet to a service advisor is very seamless. I mean, they already get probably 70% of the job, and the rest is skill training that they'll get from the manufacturer. So I would just encourage everybody to really view, and a lot of you have started off in those roles a long time ago. Make sure that we pay those people well, that they get a good experience during their onboarding and they get to learn the dealership, and it's viewed as almost an internship. And that's one of our secret sauces for how do we get somebody to show up to work to make $15 or $16 an hour in a job that is 300 to 400% turnover in the industry. And a big part of it is showing them a career path and really talking about the opportunities. And it's pretty cool when you get a college kid coming in to work 15 hours a week and he finds out Bob, who's, a mediocre service advisor, makes 6 figures on the drive. It's like, I want that job. That looks awesome. I'll do that.
Of course, yeah.
So it's really exciting to see that opportunity. I think the automotive industry is one of the last places where you can show up to work without any degrees or anything. But if you have a good work ethic and you learn how to interact with people and you work hard and you give it time, it's unbelievable the income opportunity and the career path that's created in this industry.
And Joel, one more piece, if I can add, finally, is the piece about acquiring vehicles on the service drive, which is a gold mine, which is not mined by so many dealers, and actually having a process to do that. You've incorporated that into what you do at Citrin for dealers who want to do that, sourcing those used vehicles from the service lane. That's a real thing, and it's growing. If you'd like to speak to that, Sarah and I think that's so unique what you're doing there that a lot of dealerships may not be aware that you offer that as well.
Yeah, well, we realized over the years that service directors love us, GMs who have to pay our bill every month. Labor is expensive, right? And you take a bunch of costs that go into our a budget and put it into one outside service line. It's a big number. And so how do we, beyond what we're doing for the service department, which can be somewhat intangible, how do we help keep our GMs happy, especially in this economic climate? And with everyone, I think it's a known fact that there's an opportunity to source more vehicles up the service drive. It's actually pretty challenging because it takes consistency and repetition. And to have a salesperson out there, if you look at the personality profile of an average salesperson, For them to stand in the service drive all day to talk to 100 customers to hope to convert 2% if they're good at it is a tough value proposition. But what we realize is we're greeting every single customer. The valets are using custom tailored word tracks. And so all we're doing as we check them in is, oh, by the way, we're short on used vehicles. Would you be interested in talking to a specialist? And those two sentences now take 100 ROs and identifies 10 to 15% that raise their hand and are now a qualified lead. And if they say yes, important part is we make sure that the RO is open. They go talk to the service advisor so it doesn't slow down the service process. And then we introduce the salesperson or move them over to the salesperson. No service director wants salespeople on their service drive talking to their customers. And no salesperson wants to stand out there all day. But in this method, it doesn't replace equity mining or texting ahead. I think those things are all important. But ensuring compliance on making sure every customer as they arrive get that same consistent greeting. I also think that there's an opportunity, which we're now exploring, of having that same team. They're already using tablets to do the walk around for the service appointment. Why not have them walk around and load the file for the sales team that captures the VIN, the damage inspection, the scratched rims, the ding on the windshield, and loads the file. So now the sales team has a preloaded file and a qualified customer, and every vehicle going through your service department now has been appraised, and the data that is in that in the CRM, I think, is really powerful. But there has to be people who are willing to follow up with those leads and contact those and work it. And we can generate all the leads that the service department can generate all the leads that they can for the sales department, but the sales team really has to be bought in, from the GM to the GSM to the used car manager to the folks that they have really working that part of the business for it to be successful. So been spending a lot of time with Brian. I think he's probably tired of me calling him, asking questions about it. But I think with the tools out there, it's getting easier and easier to appraise a vehicle that are more accurate. And it just comes down to that daily repetition. But I think it's a good opportunity for the service directors to say, hey, I know this doesn't really help my department that much, but what it does do is it justifies the labor resource for your hourly staff. You're no longer having to fight with your GM to give your valets an extra buck an hour or to hire an extra person or two, if that team is now the lead generation engine for the GM. So I think it's a way to look at it to cover your, what do they call it, unapplied labor, Ted, where it's the unapplied labor expense.
Yep.
It's a good way to defend increasing that cost internally or externally.
Yes, that's a big time.
And so I guess that's a question for you, is if the service director is under cost pressure and also pressure to grow the business, what advice do you have for them about making sure they can defend their budgets and also successfully ensure that they have the resources to grow their business when in an environment to where there's a lot of apprehension about adding any incremental cost to the overhead of a dealership?
Well, you touched on a lot of incredible points in our discussion today, and there is a big case for doing right by the customer and that retention strategy of ensuring that, as you described, the customer's perception is tied into the experience and how they're treated throughout this entire process. And there's costs associated that don't fit into a balance sheet or an income statement when it comes to how somebody feels in that process. And this entire conversation that we've had today, all of the communication, all of the transparency, those are pieces that Ted and I have a lot of conversations in the industry about how important this is to the customer. This is what they're looking for. It's the experience that they're really striving to have, because like you said, Joel, anybody can go anywhere to get their oil changed. They're coming to the dealership for that trust, for the transparency that they're expecting. And again, a lot of times the reputation that the OEM and that brand carries with how they'll take care of them should there be, a warranty item or something else that happens during the course of that repair order process. But all of those pieces, Joel, become important to analyze. But my advice to dealers listening is, look at this from, as you described, these are elements that go into your marketing and your awareness and your brand in your community and within the industry. There's pieces that you can gain efficiency with your capacity, with your scheduler. And Joel, all of this equation, if you have a resource like Citrin that can help train the next group of service advisors and the next group of candidates that are going to be part of your retention strategy, I can't put a dollar figure on that because it's so valuable to me as a business to be able to have quality people that are going to fulfill those values. So, kudos to you, Joel. This is a really exciting conversation. And Ted, I know we've got a lot more that we'll unpack with Joel this year and Citrin, and I'm excited to hear Joel some more success stories that are coming your way.
Joel, what's the best way for our audience to learn more and reach out?
Yeah, email would be great. Joel@citrin.co. Happy to talk to anyone. And beyond, being a service in the industry, if I can be valuable at all on giving some tips on how to improve your workforce when it comes to these hourly roles. I've had the luxury of spending 19 years of my life focusing on how do you hire hourly employees and motivate them and do the jobs a lot of people don't want to do. So I think the industry really has an opportunity to evolve in that category, and paying these guys a little bit more money, giving an opportunity for increased compensation through some of these spiff programs or some of the opportunities for them to help the sales team with vehicle acquisition programs, and bringing more awareness to them about what income requirements or income thresholds they can earn in the shop or in the service department or in the sales will really help you build a better relationship with those hourly team members and get them to care more about doing the things that we're talking about with hospitality and showing up to work on time and being more stable. So even if you're not in a position to use a third party that doesn't interest you, I'm still advocating for paying these guys a couple dollars more an hour. It means a lot to people at this wage tier. We were struggling with application flow in a certain suburb here in Ohio. We increased our ads by $1, and we saw applications go up by 40%. So if you are struggling with turnover or applicant flow with these roles, pay these guys a few dollars an hour extra. They're the lowest paid people in the dealership and some of the hardest working. And as you mentioned, Sarah, this is your future workforce, and you should never have to hire an outside advisor again if you have a strong team of hourly employees who feel like they're cared for and they feel like they're part of the team versus feeling like they're kind of thrown out there and not really part of the larger ecosystem within the dealership.
Growing your own is so critical, Joel.
Joel Furno, everybody, here today with Citrin Automotive Hospitality at the Fixed Ops Roundtable.
Thank you, guys.